Hey, I'm Andy, and welcome to Rock, Roll, and Red Plaid. My name for this, the Rock, Roll, and Red Plaid podcast. The one, the lovely, the one and the only Sara Ramsay. Sara is a Canadian singer and world-renowned vocal instructor, can't speak, growth coach, and podcaster. She comes from a long line of musicians. I jokingly say that between her and her siblings and all of them, they're like the modern day Partridge Family. Sara, also a self-admitted seeker. To quote her from her own website, I am a seeker who loves to learn, passionate about so many different things. Yeah, I'm basically a nerd.
That's
Well,
me.
well, you're in luck, Sara, because here on the Rock Roll and Red Plaid podcast, we love nerds. So,
You are my people.
yes. So I guess, doing a little bit of digging research on you and your background, it seems that, like I said, the musical family really played a part in growing up. But what was it like for you individually? I don't know how many siblings do you have, like between all you guys?
So there are actually five of us in total.
Oh,
We don't have all the same parents, but we all
gotcha,
have the same dad.
gotcha.
But three of us grew up together.
Okay,
My brother Josh and my sister Angela, we all grew up together.
okay,
And then I have two other siblings who I did not grow up with,
gotcha.
Sean and Shelly, who
Okay,
live in well, they lived in California growing up. They don't both live there now, but
sorry.
um and yeah, so there's a whole schwack of us.
Schwack is a word for you. So I guess looking at my notes here, um, uh, and you can topple on top of this, obviously, but it was clearly not a fly by night for you guys to get the music genes. I thought of being grown up in Boston here. There was a former Red Sox player who married a professional soccer player. I mean, I'm just thinking those kids must have the athletic gene.
Right,
Just
The-
so
their
looking
high
at
twitch muscle fiber is probably
yes.
pretty on track.
So that was my question to you. Did that just growing up around all of it come really naturally to you, or was there?
It did. I'm not gonna lie, I was a teenager before I realized that it was not, I don't want to use the word normal, but let's say commonplace
Mm,
for families to sit around the piano and sing in four-part harmony in the evening. Because although that wasn't every night, it was certainly common in our house.
commonplace, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it was so much a part of the fabric of our family that I didn't realize that it wasn't for other families until I was a lot older than I should have been.
You would say what, 13 or 14 until you figured out, like, wait a second, nobody
Yeah,
knows what I'm talking about here.
something like that. Well, just understanding that that wasn't an experience that everybody had in their family
Mm,
life, and that, well, that music wasn't such a part of the fabric, and that everyone wasn't as um easily musical, let's say.
mm. Because when I uh was growing up, it was for me, it was being only child. But then when you, for me, I how would you put it? Without sounding strange, I found a guitar book called the Guitar Grimoire. It's very
Mm-hmm.
and there's just modes and scales and theories that both applied to the modes and the scales. And when you're 12 or 13, and especially when you're on the autism spectrum, such as I,
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to be focused on anything, you're going to be laser sharp.
Yep, yep.
So by the time I went into seventh grade, I was playing Van Halen, not on
Mm-hmm.
Guitar Hero, but for legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that was the moment when every kid went, and I'm like, what? I did my homework. And when they, especially for a kid to tell them to do their homework, they're like, no, no. I'm like, no, I mean,
Yeah,
like, you just practice. Because
yeah.
yeah, it came naturally, but I put the work in.
Well, you
So
have the
yeah,
superpower of hyperfocus, right?
I call it OCD, but
I call it a superpower.
I didn't say it wasn't. It's just, It's just kind of what it is. What,
Mhm.
apart from the singing aspect of it, what was your first, I guess I don't want to say real instrument, but tangible instrument?
Mm.
Um,
Physical, like
yes,
outside of the body
string
instrument,
pluck, hit, whatever. Yeah,
mechanical instrument. There we go.
mechanical.
Uh, I guess my first instrument was piano.
Mm-hmm.
I took Kodai prior to that,
Would
which
I?
is the do re mi fa sol la ti do.
Okay.
So I took Kodai like as a, I don't know, I was in probably play school, maybe kindergarten when I took Kodai. And
Mm-hmm.
then I took piano for a few years. I think I got to grade 3 Royal Conservatory. But I was really not all that interested in the Royal Conservatory part of it. I just wanted to, by that point, I had sort of figured out that I wanted to be able to play in order to accompany myself to sing. And
Mm.
Royal Conservatory was not giving me that. So, but I had the basics at that point. I knew all my scales. I knew how to construct chords, like I could build a triad. And then with a little bit of input from my parents, I started understanding how to build seventh chords and how to build nine chords, and, you know, got a little deeper than that over time. I don't mean all when I was like in grade 4, but
No, yeah.
over time. Um, and then I played in grade 6. I played violin for a year
Ah,
on scholarship. And my grandfather had been a violinist. So
okay.
he was super excited about that. And apparently it came quite naturally to me. But we will just say that the teacher and I did
Oh,
not quite see eye to eye.
okay.
So I just had a 1 year of violin.
I,
um,
yeah.
yeah, it's, you know, I it was she was a very, very old school music teacher at my school, and I got it on scholarship because I was musical and whatever, but we
Sure.
we definitely butted heads. And I wanted to play with no shoulder rest, and that's how boys play, not how girls play, but it's how it felt comfortable in my body. And you know what I mean? And these things did not sit right with her.
I
So,
don't know. To me that
um,
to me that sounds like, teaching guitar versus sitting versus playing. So, excuse me,
mm,
sitting versus standing. Because like,
mhm,
does that really matter?
mhm.
You're playing it, you know? Because that, yeah.
And I get that in classical violin, that's how it is typically done. But I also know now, as a teacher myself,
Mhm.
there might be a standard way, but that doesn't mean it's the only right way.
Right. There's no necessarily cookie cutter.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything should be adapted. Like, it doesn't matter what instrument we're talking about. I am of the belief that you come from a starting point of a standardized um instructional point of view or playing point of view or whatever, and then you adapt it to the person in front of you. That might mean
Right.
their learning style, that might mean their physical capabilities, that might mean their physical preferences, that might mean a lot of different things, but no teaching should be cookie cutter. No
No, never.
instruction and learning should be cookie cutter. Everything should be um, made to be the best fit for the student.
I remember two of my students. They were two siblings, and the older sister was a little more reserved and kind of introvert, as it were,
Mhm,
but really had a great ear for chords, and not and I mean it more in a rhythm way, just like picking it, like you said, sevenths and ninths and whatever
mhm,
else, because she came from a piano background, and that was her jumping off point. The younger sister, as let's say energetic as she was,
mhm,
it's like it was like a mini. It's like, how would you put it? And I mean this in the best way possible because we're still friends with them, but it's like you could just see her being like the female equivalent of Angus Young. She is just such a spaz, and it's like you teach her a minor pentatonic and a blues scale, and she will be off. Just that's all she needs. you know,
Yep.
But then I would teach them both at the same time, and it really should have been a separate thing because I was still younger too, probably in my early 20s at that point, teaching them, and it was great, and I really hope they're still doing something with it because my goodness, I just remember walking in one day and the older sibling was playing this like finger style thing, and I'm like, "Oh, what's that?" She goes, "Oh, I wrote that." I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
Well, come on, what do you got? What do you got? It was almost like that scene in School of Rock where he's like, "Oh, I don't know if it's very good," and the kid in the movie, and he's like, and I'm like, "No, no, no, what do you got? Come
Yeah.
on, come on." You gotta draw it out of them sometimes. Sometimes they're a little too eager. I know that's been me. Song, okay, well, hold on, let's go through this first. So never a cookie cutter, really, unless the cookie is being molded by hand, if you will.
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of individual
sure.
business
Yeah.
in the business of learning anything, but especially music. And
Yeah.
then just to finish off your question, I took flute for a couple of years.
That's a hard instrument.
It
That's
is, and I played
that
open
whole
hole
thing.
flute, not closed hole flute. So I
Oh,
played. It's like learning to drive standard instead of learning to drive automatic.
sure.
Same instrument, but you're
Yeah.
doing it just a little bit harder. Um,
Yeah.
and then I didn't have any sort of technical instruction on any instruments after that, but I taught myself how to play bass and how to play guitar.
Sure.
Well, I had one lesson from my brother when I started learning how to play guitar. One lesson.
Yeah.
Um, and that's probably about it for instruments for me.
Right. I play mandolin. I just
Mhm.
mostly chords. I think on your site you're posing with a mandolin, unless
I
unless
am,
you're
but that is
chord.
a pose. I
That is a
do not
pose.
actually play mandolin. And it's
You know
very funny because if you search me, I don't know if it's on Google, if it's there's some, I can't
something
remember
of
the
the
name of it
sort.
right
Yeah.
now. There's a website that it talks about musicians specifically. It's sort of a a not Wikipedia, but it's like a that sort of site for
Yeah.
like discography and
Information driven.
information, but it's all about musicians. And it says that I play mandolin, and I don't know
And you
how to
don't.
correct it because I do not. It
I
was
will
the
have to.
photographer handed it to me
Yeah.
and said, "This will make a great photo."
And it did. It was
Yeah.
great. It did work. But I will say I do play on my new record. I have at least two songs that'll have feature it. One of them's a cover song where me and my dad did co-lead vocals, and I played
Mm-hmm.
mandolin on "You Got to Hide Your Love Away," which
Mm-hmm.
the old Beatles tune, which is so funny because that song translates so well to mandolin. If you think about it, it would work so well. And I'm like, I got to do it this way, and I did. That was the first song I learned on it.
Yeah.
So you see
Good
the
for
cat
you.
there. I know I mentioned before the name of this podcast here is Rock Roll and Red Plaid, but of course we'll have all different kinds of music here. But I always figured, and I was trying to mention this to my friend earlier, that rock and roll may be just a not just a genre, but I think it's an attitude too. There's a certain
Mm-hmm.
level of I wanted to get your take on this. Because I've seen so many different artists that have that. There's not even something you could put your finger on, but it's just there's an attitude there to it. It's not even that they're saying or doing. It's more just the way they carry themselves. I mean, Johnny Cash technically was in all technicalities, a country artist, but he was more rock and roll than some of the people now.
Yep.
So,
I think that something that you are referring to in rock and roll is an unwillingness to do it the way everybody else has done it. It's like
mm,
the the drive to break the mold every
mm,
time. I think that's
yeah,
sort of, and sometimes that comes out in um you know really bad behavior. And sometimes that comes out in astoundingly groundbreaking music, and
Mhm.
and it can come out in all sorts of ways, but I think at the base of it, the through line in all of those is that everybody's doing something new and different, or in their own way. It's that breaking the mold, um that to me is the through line in rock and roll.
I agree, because like I was talking to my friend Cliff, who I'm gonna have on the show sometime soon, and he's I venture to say a religiously fanatic about punk rock, and
Yep.
but his jumping off point was like 50s rockabilly, and
Hmm.
he's really making the connection between those two genres, because a lot of those early punk guys were influenced by, like, you could say Little Richard, you could say Elvis, any of those guys. But I, at the same time, and I'm not throwing Cliff under the bus, that's a good friend of mine, but what I'm saying is, I'm like, you gotta swoop through the genres here, because there's rock and roll, quote unquote, in everything.
Hmm.
And that's kind of why I threw that in there a little bit, because it's like I've co-written a few songs with him, and it's usually his ideas, and I was just like, okay, what do you think? And then I'll sneak in little things, and I go, you know what that was? And then I'll play him this, and he goes, oh, that's what that was. So I'm like, just little in styles of, and slowly but surely, you know, because I tell everybody, it's like there's good music in every genre. You just got to
Hmm.
look for it. It's not always readily available anymore.
And great songwriters, I think it's incredibly important as a songwriter to
Mm-hmm.
listen to a wide,
Mm-hmm.
wide range of genres, not
Mm-hmm.
just the genre that you're going to write in,
Sure.
for exactly the reason that you just talked about. And that
Mm-hmm.
is because you can take ideas, you can take little pieces of inspiration from a lot of different things. Just because you're writing punk rock doesn't mean you're not going to take some piece of inspiration from Mozart,
Mm-hmm.
or country, or whatever. Like, there's don't just stick to your own lane
Yeah.
in terms of your
Right.
listening.
Sure.
Your listening should be way wider than that. When you are producing music that is intended for mass commercial release,
Mm.
there is, or was, I actually think this is changing anyway, with the shift from purchasing a physical CD over to purchasing song by song, or just streaming song by song. I
Yeah.
think there's been a shift in this, but I think for a lot of years, there was a really good reason to stay in one lane with one genre, one style for an artist on a record. I now think, because if you're purchasing a record, you want to know kind of what you're getting on the whole
Yeah.
thing out of that artist.
Yeah.
But now, if you are downloading a song, and then you're downloading a song from somebody else, or God love the
Mm-hmm.
people who actually purchase them, because that supports the musicians so much better than streaming does. FYI, always
Mm-hmm.
and every time, if you can purchase the stuff that you love, that is always going to support the musicians that you love better. Um, but if you're
That
going
might be
to,
your quote from this here.
it's true. I mean, I'm all for streaming, paying for your streaming services to check out new stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then the stuff that you really love, go back and buy it. It
Yeah, just
supports,
go and get it. Yeah.
it really does support the musicians that you love on a way different
Right.
scale than streaming does.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers, it's a whole different ballpark. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think now that we are in a different era of consuming artists song by song rather than as a whole record, a whole uh, journey experience from the beginning of the record to the end of the record. We don't really
Right.
experience music that way anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's positives and negatives to that, but what I think one of the benefits of that is that I think it gives the artist a lot more freedom to explore more laterally, like
Be more flexible
yeah, in terms of their
stylistically.
stylistic choices, the genres that they're playing in. They don't have to just stay in one lane because the listeners are rarely going to experience them
Right.
for 10, 12, 14 songs in a row. They're going to
Right.
experience them for one
And
song
they get
at
the
a
one
time.
shot thing,
Yeah.
which is to I always loved albums. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
just an old soul, but my father, for frame of reference, graduated high school in 77. Okay.
Yep.
So this is actually kind of funny. And for our listeners, here's for frame of reference, your brother is Josh from Mariana's Trench.
Yep.
And I have always loved the what is it, the Astoria record. That's
Yep.
been just my personal favorite because I'm kind of a vintage weirdo myself. And I left it in the CD player in the downstairs, and I come home and my dad's thoroughly enjoying, I think it's Shut Up and Kiss Me, the song.
Yep.
And I'm like, and he thoroughly was convinced that it was like a Jackson 5 B-side.
Yeah. It sounds like the Jackson
It's
5.
really so, and correct me if I'm wrong, were you before he and his guys did their first record, were you somehow involved with them before? Like maybe it was just when you were
Well,
kids, or
no. So before Mariana's Trench was Mariana's Trench, it Josh's band was Ramsay Fiction, and I was a member of Ramsay Fiction.
Of course,
So,
what a name.
right? And it was Ramsay Fiction was a 5-piece band, where Mariana's Trench is 4.
Sure.
And I played keyboards and sang backups, and it was really handy for me to sing backups for Josh because we have this genetic blend that when we try to, we can sound indistinguishable in certain parts of our voices. So like we listen to old demos from those days, and even he and I don't know who's singing what.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna goofingly ask, who's the better singer, you or him? No, I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you what his answer is, but I
Uh-oh.
wouldn't answer it the same way.
No, I'm just kidding, because I'm saying there's only a few siblings in bands that are brother sister. Like I can only think of like modern day. I can think of Hailstorm, Lizzie Hale and her brother's the drummer, and the Carpenters. But apart from that, not knocking them either. No, but love. Karen Carpenter was a heck of a drummer too.
Oh.
If you
I did not
that
know
blew
that.
me that blew me away to see that. That was really cool.
Because she was a hell of a singer.
Right. And
but
then,
I didn't know that she was a drummer.
Well, you didn't?
No.
Well, have you ever seen her do any?
I have not.
Okay, go look that up, because like
I'm not gonna lie, music is primarily an oral experience for me. It's not a visual experience for me.
I know, but
most of the time,
you know those old variety shows they had.
Yeah.
She's doing like jazz swing stuff.
Amazing.
And, like it's really, really cool. So I guess, yeah. So how did siblings in a band? Because I've been in bands with siblings. Like my friends Max and Alex, we did a project for a while, and they were the rhythm section, bass and drums, and to have a siblings rhythm section,
yeah,
you're done. That's probably the best thing you could have, because they would just look at each other.
Yeah.
And it almost would look like they're going to get in a fist fight, but they're actually just like, it was almost like they were syncing, like Vulcan mind melding or something.
It's just ESP.
I guess that was just one of those things that blew my mind, because we never had to worry about falling off track.
Yeah. I loved playing with my brother. It was and is every time it happens, because it's still from time to time happens. I played in a like a convention band, a party band. We
Mhm.
would do like weddings and casinos and
Oh, cool.
things like that. Played in that for a long time, and once in a while, Josh would come
Just
to
show
hear
up
us
and be
play,
like,
and
yeah.
we'd get him up to sit in, and so that, or a couple of times I've sung with him, with Mariana's Trench, gigs here and there,
Sure.
and on records and stuff. It is still my absolute favorite musical experience is to sing with my brother, and especially to work in the studio with my brother is hands down my favorite studio experience. I would do that all day, every day
Yeah.
if I could. It is just my favorite.
That's so sweet, I must say, because I don't have any siblings personally, but that's so sweet to hear, honestly. I only got to see them, Mariana's, once at House of Blues about 8 years ago. And
you would, that's a treat because that's a nice small
yes. And I was
venue.
basically about less than a quarter of the way back. So pretty upfront. And throughout the night, I think he played bass, drums, guitar, and I think even piano at one point, and sang this crazy range. And I'm just looking to myself, because I was a casual listener at that point. Some of my friends were going. I'm like, yeah, why not? And I was just like, but that night I was just like, who the heck is this guy? And I mean this with all due respect, because I say this just from what he does. It's like, and I say this when any musician I meet, a freak of nature, because
Yeah.
so much stuff that happens, and I see that in what he's done with you and all that stuff, for sure. And I love the sibling thing in music. I just wish I had.
Yeah.
But I
It
have
is
plenty.
a very special thing, and I don't take it for granted at all.
Good,
It's a
good.
really
Yeah.
special thing.
Well, tell him if ever he does press for the next thing, he's got an open invite here. So,
All right, will do.
but we have some actual. When I said on my forum thingy that a vocal teacher was coming to my podcast, it was the most responses of questions
Oh,
I've ever
wow.
had thus
Awesome.
far. You darn near broke the Twitter on that one.
Fantastic. So are we going to
So,
answer questions now?
just a couple of them, yeah. Just to
All
take a
right, let's
few.
go.
Marie from over the street in Salem, Mass, here, has asked, how do you discover what she calls classification of your voice is, meaning soprano, alto, etc.? Like, I think she's wondering what range she has, and how do you figure that out?
Well, I'm going to answer this, and it might not be your favorite answer, but depending on what you're singing, if you are singing classical music, that classification matters, because repertoire is classified for soprano, mezzo, alto, tenor, baritone, bass.
Sure.
If you are singing like popular music, contemporary music, microphone based musics, so that's like rock, pop, country, gospel, worship music, I could go on, blues,
Down the
like,
line, yeah.
etc. Those classifications really don't matter a whole lot. They really don't. You're going to find the key that works for you, and that's what you're going to do. And so whether you are a soprano or an alto or a tenor doesn't matter a whole lot. And so from my perspective, being someone who comes from contemporary music, who has done some classical in a choral setting, I am not a solo classical singer at all, but I've done a lot of choral work. But really, my like the population that I work with in terms of students, I don't teach classical voice.
Okay.
That's not, there are a lot of people who do it a lot better than I do. So I would far rather you get that instruction somewhere else. I do contemporary voice. So for that, it really doesn't matter a whole lot. We use it because it's familiar. Basically, if you're a girl who sings high, we'll call you soprano. If you're a girl who sings low, we'll call you alto. If you're a boy who sings high, we'll call you tenor. If you're a boy who sings low, we'll call you bass. But it doesn't really have to be anything set in stone. I am a girl who sings tenor, actually.
Interesting.
Like range wise. If so, if you come from classical, there are actually specific ranges that
Mhm.
relate to each of those pieces of terminology. And I have sung in choir, both tenor and alto and mezzo, but I couldn't do mezzo now in this
No,
part of
right.
my life. It was when I was younger. Do you sing high, low, or somewhere in the middle? That's
More or
really
less, yeah.
as much as you need to know, because what you actually need to know in folk music isn't always amplified, but we're gonna lump it in for the sake of what I'm talking about, though,
Sure.
is that what you need to do is find the key that works for you in the song that you're singing, and that's
Mm,
as much of a reference point as you need.
right.
I it like I will tell you that in the course of my career, in popular contexts, like contemporary contexts, I don't often say I'm alto or I'm tenor. What I say is I'm a girl with a really low voice. I'm a girl who sings in boy range. That's the terminology that I typically use with other musicians when we are trying to land on a key.
So Barry Gibb was a guy who sang in a very high range then, and it whatever. So,
Yeah. So I mean, there's classical terminology for that, but he was basically singing in mezzo soprano range.
there you
Like,
go.
but we don't call Barry Gibb a soprano.
No.
We just call him a guy who had a really great falsetto.
Yeah. Regardless of, whether or not I enjoy the disco, which I really don't, I can't deny that those guys sang the heck out of their songs.
They
And they
sure
did.
did.
Yeah.
They sure did.
I
Yeah.
just can't get past the white suits. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
And Marie, if you really, really, really want to know the actual classification, you can look it up online. Like you can Google that. What is a tenor range? What is an alto range? What is a mezzo soprano range? What is a soprano range? And it will give you an actual like note range that applies to that terminology if that's a thing that really matters to you coming from a classical standpoint, and you can figure out where your vocal range sits most closely.
Right. Answered directly. How about that?
Yeah.
And then the two-part question is came from AJ, and they wanted to ask, do you have any tips for people who are trying to expand their range? And perhaps they also asked, how can you go higher into your voice without getting into falsetto? Maybe that might be a
So
two-part question.
it is a two-part question. So the answer to the first one is you go very slowly. You
Mm,
don't expand your range quickly. This
mm,
is not an overnight thing. This is a matter of like an extended period of time, and you are going to expand your range one note at a time, not any more than that. You're going to expand your range by like a semitone up or a semitone down. And what I mean, that's actually a big thing to address, but it's you have to find all of the what makes it feel good with that new note before you add any more notes. So um terminology is always changing in the voice world, but if you want to use the terminology of talking about placement, or how it feels resonant, or
mm,
where there's the most ease. That's the terminology I tend to use, is where there's the most ease to produce sound X, whatever the sound is we're going for. Once we have that firmly in place, then we can try adding a semitone to it, but we're not going to move up or down um, beyond your comfort. So if your high note is a G, we're not going to give you an A flat. We're not going to work at an A flat until we're good and solid at a G.
right.
Um, because all you're going to do is potentially sort of burn out the stuff that you do have solidly
Yeah.
if you move too quickly. So adding more range, you can absolutely do it, but you do it slowly, not fast.
Right.
What was the second part of that question?
Uh, Going higher in your voice without getting into falsetto.
That is a matter of increasing your range in your chest register.
Mm.
So, again, it's sort of the same thing I was just talking about, except we are specifically working in your chest register, and or if that's unfamiliar terminology, it's like your big voice, the voice that most of us speak in.
Hmm.
That's your chest voice. We are going to work in the same way, slowly, but just in that without letting it flip over up into your falsetto. I don't have a lot more that's like that I can fit into a podcast.
That's okay.
But sound bite to give you that. That's a thing that honestly, if you wanted to work at, you would benefit from some individual instruction, whether that's from me or whether that's from another vocal coach, whoever you want to work with. That's a thing that is going to be beneficial, even if what you do is go to them and say, this is the thing I want to work on. And they give you some things to work on, and you just do that one lesson and you go away and work on those things before you come back to expand out. It's you're always going to get the most progress fastest when you work consistently with a coach and you are consistently practicing on the other end, but that doesn't mean it's the only pathway. You can absolutely do it other ways, but so if consistent work with a coach isn't your mode of choice, what I would recommend for something like that, increasing range or increasing range specifically in your chest voice, would be to go and do a single drop-in lesson with somebody who has the capacity to teach that, and then go away and work on it on your own.
Right. I know from the only few lessons we've done, because you
Mm-hmm.
are actually we're working together, and I know
Yep.
just the few things you've mentioned, even when I'm singing, even if it's in a formal setting or just lottie dying around, I'm aware of it now. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
not that this sounds weird, but it's like you're changing my thinking. But in a way, it is. It's good
That's
because
what it
you're
is.
aware of things. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so much of what happens with our voices before we start getting intentional about it is very unconscious. We're unaware of what we're doing. And as we start to work, with a coach or um, with some specific instruction, so much of what we're doing is actually bringing awareness to those things and then shifting little things about it. But it's really about the awareness.
yeah,
That is 100%. You nailed it, Andy. That's the first step.
yeah.
100%.
Because one of my favorite guitar players had brought out a very interesting point about, and it's not so much in the guitar, in the same, what do you call it? In the same, in parallel, it's the
Yep.
same kind of thinking. You can only pick as fast as you can pick one note. Unless you're if you can't do all this unless you're just picking one note as
Yep.
fast as you can go. And if that's it, then that's it.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can work on getting faster, but although I've always said David Gilmour could do more with one note. But that's debatable, but it's all pizza at the end of the day. It's all good. So
That's right. That's right.
if there's one musician you'd love to collaborate with, given the chance and no issues or time constraints, who would it be?
Oh, my dream collaboration. That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a hard question. So, as a musician, I'm assuming that question is coming as a musician, not as a
Sure.
teacher.
No. Right.
I don't know. I don't think I can narrow it down to one, but I could narrow it down to three.
Mm.
My dream collaborations would be um Sarah Bareilles.
Ooh, okay.
Love, love, love her voice and her writing.
Sure.
And the other two are a little bit more old school,
Mm-hmm.
but um James Taylor
Okay.
and Sting. Those would be my
Ooh,
three like
that's a
dream. Yep.
all at once or just
Oh
separately?
my God. I think
Your
if
head
it
would
was all at
explode.
once, my head would explode.
For me personally, I come from the jam vibe, like just setting
Yeah.
up at somebody's house, just jamming something. Um, Gosh, I don't even know. Just drummers, I don't know. Just but as regards like guitar players, me being a guitar player, I'd
Yeah.
love to have Satriani because
Yeah.
I met Joe when I was like 14, and he was the nicest guy on the planet for me. Like 10 minutes talking to him, and the first three were me just going. He's the nicest guy ever. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming down. So him for sure. Uh, I can't sing for crap, so I need you
I
or your.
know for sure that's not true, but continue.
Well, that's why I'm here. Well, as in, like, I'd rather just in one of those settings, I'd rather be the guitar player.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
I'd
get
play
that.
rhythm behind Joe any day, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Bass, either Michael Anthony or Billy Sheehan,
Mm-hmm.
um, or both. Why not? You know, and vocals. Actually, you could kill two birds with one stone with bass and vocals and do Glenn Hughes from Deep Purple.
Mm-hmm.
God, as older as he's getting, like he's just like doing the anti-aging thing. But as regards like songwriting, I wouldn't really want to write with any of those guys because I'm like, they got it covered, you know.
Yeah.
As regards writing something, I'd rather be a fly on the wall watching people write, doing their
Mm-hmm.
process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not to not to pet his ego, but I've always been fascinated by stuff your bro comes out with because it's not center as in like what people would think, but it's just slightly left of center to
Yeah.
there's stuff coming out of his head that's going like, oh, it went that way. Why did it go that way? Just nerdy little stuff like that. You know, it's just, again, we love nerds here. So
The thing that fascinates me about here's a little tidbit. The thing that fascinates me about my brother and his writing process is that, like, when I'm writing, I
mm,
mean, typically if I write, I'm sitting at a piano and I'm trying things out and I'm,
mm,
try this, try that, try this.
mm-hmm,
And if I'm not at a piano and I'm trying to do stuff in my
mm-hmm,
head and hear a chord progression and a melody and whatever, I can hear a chord progression and figure out what that chord progression is. I can hear a melody and I can hear like maybe one harmony. If it's
mm-hmm.
really like simple, moving 3-part harmony or whatever, I could hear like 3
You
parts.
have most of the skeleton of the thing there.
Yeah, but like simple stuff. If it's
Yeah.
anything with weird extensions or whatever, no, I can't like hear all of those things simultaneously in my head if I haven't heard them already physically,
Wow.
right? If I'm not like replaying a recording in my head.
Unless it's just there. Yeah.
Right. My brother can hold all of that so he can like hear all of the string parts simultaneously in his head and he's just sort of transcribing them, or he can hear all the vocal stack in his head and he's just transcribing it or singing it. So that's what I find astounding about the way his brain works with music, is that there was a composer, I can't remember if it was Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. It was like one of the big guys
One of
who
the
went
bigs. Yeah.
the one who went deaf.
That was
And
Beethoven. Yeah.
okay, so he could do that because he could hear it all in his head because he was deaf and he was transcribing it, right? So he could hear symphonies in his head. And that's the only, I'm sure there are other people who can do it. I'm not
No,
saying that
no,
my
right.
brother
Yeah.
is
Of course. No, no, no.
but
Right.
but those are the only two I know of.
It makes me laugh because you know who that reminds me of is Freddie Mercury when he was
Mm,
writing Bohemian Rhapsody, probably did the same thing. Because if you, I don't know if you've seen the movie, if you
yeah.
did,
Yeah, I
oh,
have.
I wept at the end. I really did.
Yeah.
I'm going to see Queen at the Garden in less than a month too. So yes, but
Nice.
anyhow, he'll be there just to prove that he can. No,
Adam
um,
Lambert. It's Adam Lambert
it
now,
is.
or
You know,
is it
he's killing it.
Roger?
He's doing good. Yeah, yeah, he's doing great with it.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. The stacks of things, like not so much with um not with vocals, obviously, because like I said, that's one of the things we're working on, but guitar parts and things and pannings to the left and right. I think of it as someone listening to my record, like, what are they going to notice? You know, so almost always my rhythm guitars are slightly to the left, bass is slightly to the right, drums are wide panned. This is entirely nerdy stuff. Welcome to this podcast.
See, and that part of it is like a skill set I don't have. I
Yeah.
have to work with an engineer or a producer or something, because otherwise everything is just at 10 and there's
Right.
no intricacy to any of it.
When you listen, I know the title track of my new album is out. I sent it to you. The Lost Tracks of Time, the one that you said sounds like a movie soundtrack.
Yep.
There's different rhythm parts that are, I think the lead is in the middle, but there are two rhythm parts. There's the chords, and then there's the that octave part. So little things, and then at the end there's a harmony part at the top, and it was really a trip to hear that someone compared it to having a Satriani vibe, and I was just like, and you don't try, I'm not trying to sound like Joe or anything. It's just that those songs are in my DNA, it's just, anyhow.
Yeah.
What is a piece of advice you'd give to a young musician now? Maybe something you've gotten along the way, or?
I think that the most important thing is to find, I mean, there's a million ways of saying this, but like, be yourself. Find your own sound. Don't be trying to sound like other people, because especially in the landscape of music these days, we are in an era where you don't actually have to have a record label to get your music out there for lots and lots of people to hear. You are not it. We don't have the same parameters. So if your dream is to get your music out there, or get your, even if you're not a writer, being the player or whatever, what you need to do is find your sound, what matters to you. And then so it's a balance between, I know who I am and I'm going to learn everything I can. So it's those two pieces. And I would say, take every opportunity to learn, take every opportunity to play with people that you enjoy playing with. Understand that it's also okay to say no to people that you don't enjoy playing with. Like, just because you're trying to make it doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything. But that's part of knowing who you are, right? It's that balance. Know who you are, learn as much as you can. And take every opportunity to learn that you can, because there's a lot more to know in music and about the music business than we realize, I think. So that's the advice I would give.
What a poignant place to end on. Here we go. Rock Roll and Red Plaid podcast. We will see y'all next week.